sometimes the base of a percent is explicitly stated. And in that case, there is a specific phrase that we use to introduce the base. If we see the phrase percent of blank or percent of blank using the percent symbol, whatever's in the blank is going to be the base of the percentage. That is, when we're stating the base of a percent explicitly, it's always introduced using the word of, in this phrasing percent of. Please don't think that whenever you see the word of in English, it's being used to introduce the base of a percent, right? That's silly. Of is the second most common word in the English language. It is usually not being used to introduce a percent. Right? But if you see this phrase, percent of, then it's telling you what the base for that percent is. So for example, if we see the phrase 25% of dentists, then the base is the number of dentists. Sometimes we'll just write a number in the blank. If we see the phrase 37% of 50, well, that means the number that makes our percent proportion true when we fill it in for the portion, and the base is 50. We can actually even do calculations with this. We can do all sorts of calculations. Right? We could say, what is 37% of 50? Well, in order to answer that, we would solve this proportion. So we cross multiply, right? Noticing this really is a proportion. Cross multiplication really is what I want. I see that x times 100 ought to be equal to 50 times 37. Working out this multiplication, 5 times 7 is 35, 5 times 3 is 15, 16, 17, 18. Add in the trailing 0. So x times 100 is 1,850. X is going to be the missing thing in a multiplication problem. Right? So x is 1,850 divided by 100. Oh, I can write that as a decimal fraction, right? 1850 over 100. I'm going to cancel a common factor of 10. And that's going to be 185. One digit after the decimal point, 18.5. So we discover that, in fact, 18.5 is 37% of 50. Recalling the terms that we used to describe this percent proportion, x, which we discovered is 18.5, is the portion. The base is 50, and the percentage is 37. Of course, we can ask about any of these quantities, right? Not just the portion. We could say 22% of what number is 88? Right? So here, this phrase describes a quantity. This phrase describes the portion when the percentage is 22 and the number is what? Well, we don't know. The number is some unknown thing. But this phrase describes the portion. And the question is, what number do I need to make the portion be 88? This percent of tells us we're introducing the base. And in this case, the base is what we want to find out. So again, we'll set up our percent proportion, but now the portion is 88. And the base is what we want to find out. The percentage is 22, and it's always percentage out of 100, because that's what percent means. Well, we can solve this. We can cross multiply. and we'll get 88 times 100 is the other cross product, x times 22. Well, 88 times 100, that's easy. And 88 times 100, of course, that's 8,800. What is x then? X is going to be 8,800 divided by 22. Let's do that division quick. 22 goes into 8, not at all, into 88 4 times. Exactly. Still nothing. Still nothing. Right? 22 goes into 88 400 times. So we discover that 22% of 400 is 88. So we can ask a question about the portion. We can ask a question about the base. How would it look if we were asking a question about the percentage? Well, we'll say what percent, won't we? We might ask, what percent of 45 is 27? When we're asking what, we usually don't use the percent symbol. Nonetheless, we have here this phrase, percent of 45, which tells us that 45 is the base. What percent of 45 refers to a quantity? What quantity? Well, the portion, 27. So once again, we set up our percent proportion. The portion is 27. The base is 45. And the percentage is what's unknown. Percentage is x out of 100 as usual. We solve in the usual way. We take the cross products. 27 times 100 equals 45 times x. 27 times 100, that's still easy multiplication. 2,700 is 45 times x. So x is, what do we need to multiply by 45 to get 2,700? So it's 2,700 divided by 45. All right, this division is a little bit awkward, but it's okay. 45 into 2,700. 45 goes into 2, not at all. Into 27, not at all. Into 270 at least once. I don't know, let's have a guess. Let's try 5. 5 times 4 is 20, 21, 22. I think that 5 was probably too low. Let's try 6. 6 times 5 is 30. 6 times 4 is 24, 25, 26, 27. Oh, wow. 6 works really nicely, right? Because 6 times 45 is exactly 270. Nothing left. Bring down the 0, still have 0. No remainder. X is 60. So our answer is 60%. Or we could fill it into the whole sentence. So when we have one of these sentences, how do we tell what's unknown? Well, it's the one with the question word associated with it, right? What? It's the thing we're asking the question about. So I'm going to give you one of these to try. And part of the challenge is deciding which thing is the thing that you're trying to find out. So I'd like you to figure out 46 is 23% of what number? Remember, set up your percent proportion and decide which thing is the base, which thing is the portion, and which thing is the percentage. Pause the video and try this now. All right. So The base is always introduced with the phrase percent of. 23% of what number? Oh, the base is what I want to find out. So I'll write a variable name here. The number in front of the percent sign is, of course, the percentage. That's just what it is. 23%, that's 23 out of every 100. And this whole phrase, 23% of what number? That describes the portion. Does the sentence tell me what this quantity is? Oh yeah, it's right there. 46 is the portion. All right, to figure this out, I want to look at my cross products. I'll have 46 times 100 equals x times 23. Easy multiplication again. Did you notice that when we're working with percents, we're either going to do easy multiplication or do easy division? Right, we're always going to have a 100 here. We like that. It makes the arithmetic easier. So 4600 is x times 23. So x is, I get 4600 when I multiply x by 23. So that's just what this division problem tells me. Let's write that out. 23 goes into 4, not at all. Into 46, I think twice, right? 2 times 23 is 46. Nothing left. Bring down a 0, still nothing left. Another 0, still nothing left. So I get x is 200. I could just give my answer as 200, right? So that's like someone asking, what is your name? And you saying Zoe, instead of saying, my name is Zoe. Or I could answer with a full sentence and say, 46 is 23% of 200.